It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the secret government scheme to relocate thousands of Afghans after a major data leak. The breach exposed the personal information of close to 20,000 individuals who helped or worked with UK forces, endangering them and their families. Well, details of the blunder have finally been made public after a court injunction was lifted, with lawyers for those affected accusing the government of trying to hide the truth from the public. Also ahead, MasterChef presenter John Torode sacked by the BBC. An allegation that the Australian chef used racist language emerged as part of the Greg Wallace investigation. Torode says he doesn't believe the incident happened and said tonight that no one has told him he's lost his job. Plus, as the men who chopped down the Sycamore Gap tree are jailed for more than 4 years, we'll be discussing whether the punishment fits the crime. And drought is declared in 2 more areas of England as the country struggles with the driest start to a year since 1976. But will hosepipe bans really help? All that's come and much more on the UK Tonight. We start tonight with the astonishing data leak that means almost 7,000 Afghans are being relocated to the United Kingdom. The blunder back in 2022 exposed the personal information of close to 20,000 individuals who helped or worked for UK forces, endangering them and their families. Successive governments tried to keep the breach a secret, as well as the relocation programme, using a super injunction that was lifted today. Our Security and Defence editor Deborah Haynes has our first report.
Chaos in Kabul when the Taliban returned to power. Many Afghans fearing for their lives wanted to flee. The UK offered some who'd worked with them the chance to move to Britain to avoid Taliban reprisals. But an official involved with the scheme accidentally sent an email with a list of almost 20,000 applicants to addresses outside a secure government network. A major data breach that happened back in 2022 and is only now being revealed after the lifting of extraordinary and expensive reporting restrictions requested by successive governments.
Mr. Speaker, this serious data incident should never have happened. It may have occurred 3 years ago under the previous government, but to all those whose information was compromised, I offer a sincere apology today on behalf of the British government. And I trust the Shadow Defence Secretary, as a former Defence Minister, will join me in this.
The blunder may have put lives at risk and is forcing ministers to relocate almost 7,000 Afghan nationals. And these are individuals who would otherwise not have been eligible for that kind of support. They're in addition to many thousands of Afghan nationals and their families who already did qualify to be relocated to the UK. This all comes at a time when immigration is an increasingly controversial topic and government finances are under significant strain. The Ministry of Defence says the total cost to the taxpayer of all Afghan relocations is set to be around £6 billion. But even that figure will likely rise as a legal firm is preparing a class action lawsuit over the data breach.
And of the 1,000 people that you're representing, how many of them are still in Afghanistan?
Approximately 25%. We receive regular emails from our clients to say that they're in hiding. If anyone knocks on their door, they don't open. They have to keep changing their address where they live, and they live a very unstable life because of that.
We spoke to one Afghan whose name was included in the mishandled list. He'd already resettled here in the UK because of his work with British forces, but is worried for friends still in Afghanistan whose data has also been compromised.
There is no safe for them. They can't walk freedom or freely relax on the city, nothing. They all hiding,
The UK hid its mistake behind a rare super injunction. With that now lifted by a High Court judge, the true price of this disaster is finally becoming clear. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, joining me now is Shan Humber, a specialist data breach lawyer who acts for Afghan citizens affected by previous leaks at the Ministry of Defence. Shan, good to have your company to discuss this breach this evening that's now known to public and Parliament. But how much was known by those affected by it?
Well, not very much. I mean, you probably won't be surprised to say that there were rumours circulating of such a data breach, but there was an injunction in place and then a super injunction. And therefore, most of the clients actually found out today when they received an unwelcome email from the Ministry of Defence saying they'd been affected by this new data breach.
What do we know about the breach itself? Because it almost feels as in the 2 years that have passed, actually, this current government are saying the breach isn't as bad as first feared. Do we know actually what happened, where this information went?
As with many data breaches, we don't quite know what's happened to it after it's been initially disclosed. But I think, it was a very serious data breach because of the sensitivity of the data and the number of people affected. I think that's in no doubt. It only came to light 18 months later when some of the information, a fraction of it, appeared on some Facebook post. So I think it's clearly in hands where it could be disclosed further. And I think it's the thing to point out is that it's in the long line of other data breaches by the Ministry of Defence in relation to Afghan citizens. I think the MoD almost appear institutionally incapable of keeping sensitive data safe, truthfully.
Yeah, there is a history of treating the Afghans that helped us with, well, not exactly the tightest of security. And, we were just looking at those scenes there of the fall of Kabul and those people rushing to the airport and so many people applying for relocation because, we're not just talking about embassy staff that helped the UK during the West's involvement in Afghanistan, but we're talking about, cooks, cleaners, translators. Talk to me about some of your clients and the role they had and what they've been left with since the UK and the US pulled out from Afghanistan.
Well, in truth, there's a range of different roles they provided, but they all provided assistance of some sort to the UK forces and others also to US forces or Australian forces. And that was the basis of them being able to apply for relocation to the UK. And so that was the basis of the scheme. And it, almost defies belief quite how cavalier the MoD seemed to be of what is, such sensitive information. And so I think now we're left in a situation where some of those people have been relocated to the UK, and they still have some worry and concern, not least because of wider relatives that remain in Afghanistan. But the priority must be those who remain in Afghanistan, who really are extremely scared now of the possible consequences of this disclosure. And I think the government is being somewhat complacent. And don't forget, this is the government that went rushing to court to seek an injunction, super injunction, because the risk that they feared the disclosure posed now seem to be kind of, if you like, changing its mind and saying, well, perhaps there isn't such a risk. Well, the evidence that we've got, there's been credible media reports of that people are still being targeted for imprisonment, for killings, for beatings, whatever, in relation to previously having assisted the UK forces. And so I think the priority surely must be now for the UK government to redouble its action to get those on the list out of Afghanistan to the UK.
Yeah, the UK government saying it's relocating 7,000 Afghan nationals here to the UK. We understand that nearly 20,000 individuals' data was breached. And of course, that runs to a bigger number once you take into account their families. How long is the list of those that want to be relocated? And you use the word cavalier when you talk about the UK's attitude to your clients and those affected. It's worth highlighting the actual risk they face if their information falls into the wrong hands.
I think that's right. It's easy for us to sit here, me included, and just talk about, worry and distress. But these are people who are actually fearing for their lives and fearing for their families' lives, yeah? And they're literally, almost literally hiding under the dining room table, right? Because they feel so at risk. Now, it's important to say that the government really does need to take the necessary action to get them out. And I think the trouble of looking at the court ruling today and then the MoD statement and then the statement in the House is some of the figures are slightly conflicting, but it is clear that a substantial number of people remain in Afghanistan who are identified on that list, who have believe and have good reason to believe that they are at risk because of identified as such.
What do you think needs to happen now, Sean?
Well, I think the government needs to redouble its efforts to get those out, and that's why it's important to unpick the statement today to work out what exactly the government is now doing to get those out, including those who may not have met the criteria for being relocated if they hadn't been identified, by the data breach. So that's the priority, and that must be, to ensure the safety of those at greatest risk. I think it is important to say though that the government has miserably failed to keep those on the list personal data safe, and those that have suffered as a result do have a claim for compensation for the problems that failure has caused. But the priority must be to make sure that the people who are there in Afghanistan are brought out as swiftly as possible.
Well, Shan Humber, we really appreciate your time. Shan Humber there, specialist data breach lawyer at Lead Day, who acts for Afghan citizens affected by previous data breaches of the personal data by the MoD. As he was highlighting, this is not the first time their information has been compromised. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, it was a senseless crime that shocked the country and made headlines around the world. The felling of the famous Sycamore Gap tree in Northumberland. Today, the two men responsible were sent to prison for more than 4 years. The judge telling them they chopped down the centuries-old tree for no other reason than sheer bravado. Our North of England correspondent Shan Humber has this report.
It was a piece of regional heritage, known around the world. The Sycamore Gap tree stood for more than 150 years, until it was felled. An act of mindless vandalism that took mere minutes. In a video digitally enhanced by Northumbria Police, you see the outline of a person, hear a chainsaw, and then the tree topples. That act was carried out by two men, Daniel Graham and Adam Carruthers. As the famous site was turned into a crime scene,
if you could just clear back a tad, just a touch.
The pair revelled in their actions, described in court as a moronic mission. Once friends, Carruthers and Graham also exchanged these voice notes.
Someone there's tagged like ITV News, BBC News, Sky News, like news. I think it's gonna go wild.
It's on Sky News as we speak.
That bravado after an act of destruction commented on by the judge as she sentenced them both to 4 years and 3 months in prison.
Felling the tree in the middle of the night and in the middle of the storm gave you some sort of thrill, as did the media coverage of your crimes over the following days. You revelled in the coverage, taking evident pride in what you had done.
The detective who led the team working on the case said despite the crime and public outcry being unique, their approach was textbook.
Walk us through the first hours and days after which you learned that the tree had been cut down, this totemic tree, an emblem of the Northeast. What was that like, beginning this investigation?
My focus from the very start was to ensure that those golden hour principles were stuck to, and I was gathering as much information as possible to prevent the loss thereof.
This was a case that not only provoked anger, but intrigue, with a lengthy discussion in court about the sentencing guidelines. The closest we got to an explanation from either was Carruthers saying that this was an act of drunken stupidity, a decision his lawyers say he'll have to live with for the rest of his life. The court also heard a statement read out on behalf of the National Trust, who had been contacted thousands of times since by people who wanted to reflect on what the tree meant to them. Whilst the National Trust has cared for it on behalf of the nation, it belonged to the people. When it became clear this was a malicious and deliberate act, the question was why anyone would do this to such a beautiful tree in such a special place. With the pair now imprisoned, thoughts will return to a symbol of the Northeast that represented pride and place. With new shoots already growing from the stump and saplings planted around the country, the Sycamore Gap tree's legacy and future can once again become the focus. Shan Humber, Sky News, Newcastle Crown Court.
Well, joining me now, Sarah Dodd, a leading expert in UK tree law. Sarah, thank you for coming on to the UK Tonight to talk about today's sentencing, the first custodial sentence for tree felling of this kind. What were your thoughts on the sentences handed down? Over 4 years for each of these men.
Yeah, I thought it was a fair sentence. I think the maximum that was being talked about initially was 10 years, but the judge made it very clear that she had a bracket of between about 6 months and just over 4 years for a sentence. So I think it was probably as high a sentence as she felt that she could award today.
It's interesting, isn't it? This was the UK's first prison sentence for illegal tree felling. So there really was no precedent here, was there?
That's right. Yeah, not here in the UK. We haven't seen anything like this before, so there was no precedent, UK-based precedent for the judge to follow.
In terms of the punishment fitting the crime, there has been some debate over that today. And Shingi Marike, our correspondent there, was saying that there was a lengthy debate in the courtroom, really, about the sentencing laws and what could be handed down today. And you know, just in the last couple of months, we had a look at some other sentences that were handed out to those who carried out assault and domestic violence. For example, a man who punched a police officer in the face because he smiled was sentenced to 3 years and 6 months. A domestic abuser found guilty of controlling coercive behaviour and perverting the course of justice sentenced to 4 years and 2 months. And a man who assaulted his former partner just 4 days after he'd been released from a 7-year sentence for GBH against another woman was sentenced to 2 years and 11 months. Just putting those out there to give it some kind of context, a lot of people today will say for chopping down a tree, this sentence seems pretty harsh when in comparison to sentences handed out recently for assault and domestic abuse. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I've heard a lot of people saying that and commenting on that in the media, and I agree, but it's difficult because it's not really comparing like with like. Yeah. And I think it's really opened up a wider criminal justice question, which is a difficult one to answer. But I think bringing it back to this particular case and felling a tree as iconic as the Sycamore Gap, you know, it was intentional. They did it with a plan. It was premeditated. That I think this is a real fair reflection of a punishment which the court should have handed out.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you know, some of the comments made by the judge, an act of drunken stupidity, it was senseless, a moronic mission done for thrills and bravado. 2 men essentially have gone to prison today for a stupid act for over 4 years.
Yeah, that's very true. It's very true. But it goes to show that, you know, taking behaviour like that is not going to go without punishment, especially when it's to such an iconic landmark, the Sycamore Gap.
Yeah. I mean, you know, in no way excusing what happened, and the judge has handed down that sentence, but I'm just trying to give a reflection of some of the comments that are being made today by members of the public, because, again, some people may say it's just a tree. However, in court, when the National Trust impact statement was read out, that tells us otherwise, doesn't it, Sarah? It wasn't just a tree.
Absolutely, it wasn't just a tree, and it was something that was you know, in the hearts of people up here in the northeast, but also across the UK and across the world. I mean, this has got a significant amount of tension from the USA, for example. So it was far more than just a tree. And I think as many people as are saying that perhaps the sentence is high, there'll be others that are saying that perhaps it's not high enough, and actually this trajectory of treating crimes like this is incredibly important.
Yeah, perhaps you could talk to us about this kind of increase in crime, because most people will only be aware of tree law if, for example, they're trying to do some work in their garden, there's a protected tree, and, you know, they have to get in touch with someone to know whether they can cut it down or not. That's probably most people's first sort of understanding or interaction with tree law. But when you talk about increasing criminality when it comes to trees, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because, again, this is a warning shot to those creating damage.
I mean, this is pretty unique. This was 2 individuals that entered onto somebody else's land and felled somebody else's tree, and an iconic tree. But more commonly in terms of tree law, we're perhaps looking at things like individuals breaching tree preservation orders, and that's where there'll be a criminal sanction where the planning authority can bring a private criminal prosecution for someone breaching a TPO. I mean, this sort of case is pretty unique and one that we haven't really seen before. But yeah, there's a lot of tree crime out there, and planning authorities wanting to act more firmly on those as a deterrent to others.
Well, Sarah, it's been fascinating to talk to you. Sarah Dodd, their leading expert in UK tree law, commenting on the sentencing today of 2 men to just over 4 years for the felling of the world-famous Sycamore Gap tree. Sarah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
In other news today, MasterChef presenter John Torode has been sacked over an allegation that he used racist language. The chef says he has no recollection of the alleged incident, which emerged during the Greg Wallace investigation. Well, tonight, John Torode has said that he's not had any contact with the BBC or the production company behind MasterChef to tell him that he's lost his job. All this just hours after the BBC's Director General dismissed concerns about his leadership. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer has this report, and just to warn you, it starts with flashing photography.
They cook in about 8 minutes, 6 to 8 minutes.
It is a headline that almost writes itself. MasterChef's remaining presenter now also for the chop. John Torode had successfully distanced himself from claims relating to his former co-host Greg Wallace's inappropriate behaviour, weathering the storm. But after identifying himself as having an allegation upheld against him following the same investigation into his colleague's behaviour, the heat was turned up, with claims he allegedly used what the BBC say is an extremely offensive racist term. While he denies the allegation, has no recollection of the alleged incident, does not believe it happened and says that any racial language is wholly unacceptable, a BBC spokesperson confirming it takes the upheld finding extremely seriously. We will not tolerate racist language of any kind. Action must be taken. John Torode's contract on MasterChef will not be renewed. With the Director General's leadership being called into question after a slew of errors, the writing perhaps on the wall. Tim Davie keen to be seen leading from the front, albeit in an interview with his own news channel.
I was not directly involved in the looking at the detail, but I heard what the recommendation was, and I was happy that the team were taking action. I would say it's really important. We are taking this seriously. It's a reset where we make sure that people are living up to the values we expect across the board, and that's really important.
Prompting Torode to hit back online with this statement. I am seeing and reading that I've been sacked from MasterChef, and I repeat that I have no recollection of what I'm accused of. The inquiry could not even state the date or year of when I am meant to have said something wrong. I'd hoped that I'd have some say in my exit from a show I'd worked on since its relaunch in 2005. Personally, I've loved every minute working on MasterChef, but it's time to pass the cutlery to someone else. I will watch fondly from afar. Scandal once again overshadowing a day when the BBC was supposed to be talking about its annual report.
These scandals do not help the BBC. They damage trust and they leave people questioning whether the licence fee is something that they consider to be worth paying every year.
This is where the wave of ambition hits the rock of reality.
Any attempt to boast by the BBC over its successes in its annual report, overshadowed by the hot water its Director General and some of its stars find themselves in. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
So let's come here on the UK Tonight. A couple have been found guilty of murdering their 2-year-old grandson. And an inquiry warns that the harrowing crimes committed by David Fuller could be repeated.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Next tonight, a warning that the crimes of necrophiliac David Fuller could be repeated. Hospital worker Fuller sexually abused the bodies of more than 100 women and girls in hospital mortuaries. The inquiry sparked by his crimes found that current arrangements to ensure the security and dignity of people after their death are ineffective and, in some areas, completely absent. A warning that this report from our home editor Jason Farrel contains details of Fuller's offending, which you may find distressing.
Much as we'd like to, we mustn't forget what David Fuller did. The NHS electrician sexually abused more than 100 bodies in 2 Kent hospital mortuaries. Women, young and old, including 24-year-old Azra Kamal.
I spent time with Azra in the mortuary, and that moment helped me heal. We spent 2 hours together. And then subsequently, I found out that prior to my visit and shortly after my visit of my only child in the mortuary, she had been raped.
Today's inquiry looked at how we protect the dead in other hospitals, hospices and funeral parlours across England. And it concluded this.
I have asked myself whether there could be a recurrence of the appalling crimes committed by David Fuller. I have concluded that yes, it is entirely possible that such offences could be repeated.
The report found regulation and oversight of the care of people after death are partial, ineffective and in significant areas completely lacking. It said such offences could happen again and that there should be statutory regulation in place to protect the security and dignity of people after death.
If I wanted to become a funeral director and set up in my garden shed, could I do that tomorrow?
Yes, you could. At present, anybody can set up as a funeral director. They need no specific training or qualifications, and you can just do it, and nobody could stop you.
And how do you feel about that?
As I said in my interim report on it's appalling. It's entirely inappropriate, which is why I'm calling for statutory regulation.
The government is considering the recommendations, but the families of Fuller's victims also want them to consider how they are treated. 4 years on, they're still fighting for compensation and have to prove the impact on them personally.
It is not my responsibility to prove to the solicitors, the lawyers of the NHS Trust, that this has devastated me. They don't know my nightmares, and they will never know because they don't live it, Jason.
What do you think Azra would make of all of this and what you've had to put yourself through?
She would say, I'm sorry, Mum. It wasn't my fault.
This isn't just about the dead, but also those who loved them. Jason Farrel, Sky News.
A couple have been found guilty of the murder of their 2-year-old grandson. Ethan Ives Griffiths was dangerously dehydrated, severely underweight and had 40 visible bruises or marks when he collapsed with a catastrophic head injury at his grandparents' home in North Wales back in August 2021. Well, another really difficult story. Amelia Harper joins us with the details on this one. Amelia, really difficult to talk about this, having just seen those lovely pictures of Ethan in a garden there, playing as all toddlers do. Give us the background to this case.
Yeah, well, a really awful case, having just watched that footage that we just watched. And this is a very sad situation where a young boy has been failed so catastrophically by the people he should have felt safest with, his family. And now this afternoon, 2 grandparents have been found guilty of murdering their grandson, having subjected him to really severe cruelty in the run-up. And in terms of the background, how we came to this point. So Ethan Ives Griffiths collapsed with a catastrophic head injury at his grandparents' home in North Wales in August 2021, and doctors say that he had been hit or shaken. That was how he got that injury. He was also severely dehydrated, very, very underweight. He weighed only 10 kilograms. And they said he had 40 visible bruises or marks on his body. And the grandparents, Michael Ives, aged 47, and Kerry Ives, were convicted of his murder and cruelty to a child under 16. Shannon Ives, his mother, was also found guilty of causing or allowing his death. She was staying with them, and of child cruelty. Now, the pictures that we are looking at on the screen there, this is CCTV outside of their house. And jurors during the trial, of course, were shown this, and it shows Michael Ives carrying his grandson by the arm into the car. This is the end of their journey, as it were, but it appeared that he punched his grandson whilst he's in the car seat, and this was the day before his death. So you can see him there putting his hands on his head as he comes out of that car, but you can see where he is holding him by the arm. And we can hear now from a police interview where the grandfather was confronted about this specific incident.
You were quite categoric that the only times where you lifted Ethan into that vehicle was by picking him up, both hands, under his armpits and placing him in the vehicle. That is not what you're doing there, is it?
No.
How do you feel about that now?
Disgusted with himself.
Disgusted?
Yeah.
So appearing to have some sort of thoughts on that, but again, just an absolutely awful, awful situation. And prosecutors described another bit of CCTV where you could see Ethan again being handled by the arm. They said he was a bag of rubbish to be slung out. So just a really, really sad case, and the trio are going to be sentenced in October.
OK, Amelia, thank you. Amelia Harper with that difficult story this evening. Thank you. This has come here on the UK tonight. 4 areas of England are now in drought, with the public being asked to use water wisely. We'll have the latest for you. Now, the East and West Midlands have officially entered drought, joining the North West and Yorkshire after yet another spell of hot weather. After England's driest spring in more than 100 years and its warmest June ever, the public is now being asked to use water wisely. But the government and water companies are facing questions over investment or lack thereof in the country's infrastructure. Sky's science correspondent Thomas Moore has this report.
Much needed rain in Derbyshire's Derwent Valley, but don't be fooled. Like much of England, it is parched with worryingly low water levels in reservoirs. It's been the driest start to a year since 1976, and after 3 heat waves already, the government's National Drought Group is increasingly concerned. It's extended official drought status to the East and West Midlands, which join the North West and Yorkshire, which have been in drought for several weeks.
We need to stop talking about these being extreme weather events and start to accept that because of climate change, things like this are going to be more normal. So as for whether more companies will introduce temporary use bans, that really genuinely depends on what happens with the weather over the next few months.
The Environment Agency has drawn up a reasonable worst-case scenario, showing much of England officially suffering drought or prolonged dry weather by the end of this month. Even with rainfall just 20% below normal and no further heat waves, the situation is expected to deteriorate in August, meaning that by autumn, Devon and Cornwall will be the only regions completely unaffected. Ardingly Reservoir in Sussex is just 3/4 full, a record low for the time of year. Emptying reservoirs and falling river levels make hosepipe bans more likely. Within days, 8 million people in England will have restrictions on their water use. Millions more could be affected in the coming months if the drought worsens. But hosepipe bans reflect a lack of capacity. No reservoirs have been built since 1992. Since then, the population has grown by 12 million people and climate change has only worsened. And water leaks waste precious supplies. On the day the drought was extended, this was South London, where a burst Thames water main closed schools and forced evacuations. 3 billion litres of water are lost every day. That's 1,200 Olympic swimming pools.
We do have a largely Victorian-based supply system. So a lot of our infrastructure is in desperate need of upgrading. In replacement of water mains is of the order of once every 100 years in this country. And that, frankly, is shocking. This is outdated thinking and outdated infrastructure to cope with problems of the now and the future.
The possibility of drought as bad as 1976, when the taps ran dry and people had to queue in the street for water, seems unlikely for now. But pressure is building on the government and on the water companies to explain why drought is becoming the new normal. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Sussex.
Well, joining me now to discuss this is water industry expert Professor David Hall. Professor, thank you so much for coming onto the UK Tonight to discuss this. I must admit there's a bit of resentment around amongst the public today that, once again, the pressure is being put on the consumers' shoulders to conserve water, when a lot of people are going, look, our water bills are going up and water companies are wasting water and there's mismanagement of the infrastructure. Can you understand their resentment and frustration?
Yeah, they're right to be resentful and frustrated because, for all the reasons you've just outlined. As previous contributors said, we're looking at a legacy of underinvestment in the privatisation period that has meant that the system no longer delivers the amount of water needed. There's been very little progress in reducing leakage, so water is bubbling down the streets at the same time as droughts being declared. And the system is not responding to people's needs. There's a basic lack of kind of responsiveness to people, responsiveness to the public, accountability to the public, and that's because of a fundamental weakness in the system. There's no democratic elements here. Local councils have no role at all, for example, which is quite wrong. They are best placed to manage and own water and sewage systems, and that's how 90% of the rest of the world runs it.
Yeah. None of these problems are new, are they, in terms of, well, climate change, you could argue, is fairly new, but we've known about that for quite some time. So why don't we have a robust, sustainable and resilient water system?
Because the current system gives companies actual incentives to underspend on capital investment. They've been doing it since the first year of privatisation in 1990. And they realised it was worth doing because every bit they underspend on investment, they can pay out in dividends or interest to shareholders and creditors. So there's a straightforward economic problem here. These are monopolies. There's no competition constraining their behaviour, and so it's quite logical what they're doing. We should expect them to do this. As you say, we know that climate change is happening. We should be planning to deal with this. Everybody else does plan to deal with it. In Cape Town a few years ago, there was 2 years of virtual lack of rainfall, huge drought, major problems. They spent 2-3 years thrashing out a way of dealing with it, but they found one because their water system's under democratic control, and that's what we need, which is what the People's Commission on Water recommended last week, that should happen. And the government really should start taking steps to take the companies back under local public ownership to get us delivering sensible plans. We don't have any real sensible plans at local level at the moment.
Yeah, it's incredible to think, isn't it? Because every time you talk to water companies or experts, they keep talking about this Victorian infrastructure. I mean, that's some legacy, isn't it? If the infrastructure hasn't been updated since Victorian times, you know, reservoirs not built since the 90s. How do we get that done? I mean, we could get into the public ownership privatisation debate, but in terms of a practical plan, what could water companies do to future-proof our water supply?
The practical plan involves identifying in each locality the investment in the structure, whether it's managing the aquifers of groundwater, building new reservoirs or whatever, that will cope with the predictable weather patterns of the immediate future. What we have now is incoherent. The company plans are simply bids for price increases. South East Water, for example, which already announced the hosepipe ban. Ofwat has allowed it to increase prices by 25%, which Ofwat says will reduce leakage by 25% over the next 5 years. South East Water, as planned, says we will reduce leakage by 50% by 2075. A water company that says we are going to do something by 2075 is not being serious. This is really insulting public intelligence. What they mean is we're not going to do anything for as long as we can get away with it.
But in the meantime, turn off your sprinklers, everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Emergency measures need to be taken in droughts, and hosepipe bans are better than cutting everybody's requirements, families with small kids and so on. But we shouldn't be in this situation. No. We should get back our own system with proper public planning.
OK, Professor David Hall, really interesting to talk to you. Professor David Hall, their water industry expert, commenting on the East and West Midlands going into drought today, along with other parts of England. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Still to come here on the programme, when Wes met Wicks, the lockdown workout sensation joins forces with the Health Secretary to get children active over the summer holidays. Plus, there's a big transfer battle brewing after Newcastle tell Liverpool that striker Alexander Isak is not for sale.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
The question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, but
I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
Hello, welcome back. Coming up, I'm going to speak to Joe Wicks about his work with the government to get children active over the summer holidays. But first, Dave Fulton is here with the sport and the transfer merry-go-round speeding up.
Yes.
I've got Newcastle versus Liverpool. There's a showdown happening over a player. Talk to me about it.
Yes, well, the transfer window continues right up till September the 1st. So this will rumble on and on. But it is Hugo Ekitike, Eintracht Frankfurt player, 15 goals and 8 assists for Frankfurt. Third they finished in the Bundesliga. Newcastle fans perhaps excited about the fact that Newcastle are keen, perhaps nervous that he may be being lined up as a replacement for Alexander Isak, who Liverpool are interested in. Newcastle have said Isak is not for sale. He's been fantastic for the last 3 years for them. 54 league goals, helped win the Carabao Cup, of course. But that is Isak smashing one in against Liverpool, ironically. So Liverpool really interested in him, but it's going to take an awful lot to get him out of Newcastle. So Newcastle want Ekitike. They've said Isak's not for sale. So now what's happening is Liverpool, they also want Ekitike. So it's a little bit of a merry-go-round. But yeah, so that's that one. But there's other things going on as well.
There is as well. Tottenham Hotspur and Nottingham Forest fighting over Morgan Gibbs-White. What can you say about that?
Yeah, Morgan Gibbs-White, Forest fan favourite. I'm a Forest fan. Absolutely love the guy. He has a 60 million...
We'll have to fight
OK, we will fight over it. So £60 million release clause has been triggered by Tottenham. Forest are saying it wasn't done correctly to the extent that it constitutes an illegal approach. Evangelos Marinakis threatening legal action. They're digging in their heels, Forest. This one, as I say, will rumble on to September the 1st.
So complicated, doesn't it?
We will fight for him.
We'll fight it out. We'll have to do a tug of war or something.
That could work. That'll be a different way of doing things, won't it? So Morgan Gibbs-White, Alexander Isak, Hugo Ekitike, and there's even more transfer news coming up in the sport.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
How do you manage to keep your spirits up and the spirits of your teammates after challenges you may face?
Self-confidence in yourself and your own ability is such an important aspect to have.
I've had a number of injuries the last year and a half or 2 years, and they've taken their toll on my head at times.
Sometimes you just need to grab somebody and just give them a hug, tell them that it'll be okay.
Professional footballers helping young people with their mental health. That's the aim of Virtual Soccer Schools, alongside learning platform Amazing People Schools. Online, in person, and with AI technology.
My question is, how do you deal with stress on and off the pitch?
Football is the most powerful sport in the world, and utilising footballers, we just see them as players.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, the body coach Joe Wicks has joined forces with the government to launch an animated series aimed at keeping children fit over the summer holidays. He'll be releasing weekly 5-minute clips on his YouTube channel. The government has committed to fund 10 episodes as part of its 10-year plan for the NHS. Let's take a look.
Get ready. OK, squats. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, blast off! That's it.
Well, I spoke with Joe a little earlier and he told me about what he's created.
I've been working so hard at this for 2 years now. I had this idea to create an animated series of workouts for kids, specifically to get them moving, especially during summer holidays, which is a really difficult time for parents. So I went away, I went to every single platform you can imagine and said, look, I've got this idea, I want to create this, can you help me? And unfortunately, no one could really sort of invest in it, even though they love the idea. So me and my brother went away and said, you know what, we're going to make this happen anyway. So we self-funded it. We made 5 episodes. Then once we created those episodes, we then showed them to, the government, and they basically said, we love what you're doing. It's amazing what you've created. We're going to help you support this, get it out there, and also help create and fund, the next 10 episodes. So it's amazing. The partnership's amazing. I'm so proud they've got behind it. And so far, the response has been mega.
Yeah, because the demand has always been there. We remember PE with Joe Wicks in lockdown. You still regularly get hundreds of letters to come and visit schools to do a live session with kids. So the demand has always been there. The government have backed this. Talk to me about the launch today and the reaction of the kids, because you were there with the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who I noticed didn't get involved.
Yeah, it was lovely to meet him. I was hoping I'd look round and I'd see him doing some burpees, because he was in a suit, give him a break. But he was there, and I was doing my exercise with the kids, and it's lovely to see it in action. So the workout series, it's a 5-minute exercise workout. Following along, the kids just press play, they follow it, they get motivated, they get energised. And this is about, because I do love doing in-schools tours, and I do loads of them all year, but I can't visit every single school in the country. So this is my way of creating a platform and a resource for parents to use, for teachers to use. And when you see them in action, you can see that they really do love it, and they just get so engaged by the music. Listen, we've got Elton John gave us the song I'm Still Standing as our first track to launch with. So I'm really grateful for that, and it's an amazing one to launch with.
Well, parents and kids can find it on YouTube. And Joe, everybody knows your passion about getting everyone moving, but particularly kids. 1 in 5 children leaving school obese. You want to make movement and exercise a top priority in education. I wonder whether you'd ever take on a formal role if offered. You've got the likes of James Timpson, for example, who took on the role as Prisons Minister, and the Prime Minister at the time saying he gave him that role because he walked the talk. He was involved in the rehabilitation of prisoners through his company Timpson's. I wonder whether you'd ever actually take on an official role if it was offered. You've obviously now got Wes Streeting's number.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that far ahead. I'm not that intelligent, and I don't know if I've got the confidence to do it, but I do feel like I've got a chance to use my voice and my energy and be a voice for the people that do struggle with this, because my life's very different now, the house I live in, the food I get to eat, but I did grow up on a council estate, on a budget. We were on low-income family, we were on benefits. The food wasn't great, so I do know what it's like, and I know the struggle. And I'm just trying to give people the confidence to make better food choices and move their bodies more in any way that can be. And it could be a child doing it or an adult. You're still going to love Activate. You're still going to love the music. You're going to feel great. But yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely on this campaign mindset now, thinking if I really want things to change at a government level and a school system, you do have to go and speak to the people creating the policies and legislation. So yeah, I've got to have those conversations, but I'm not sure I'm going to be going, for a political role anytime soon.
Oh, well, do you know what, Joe? I think you're underselling yourself. You've definitely got the intelligence in this area, because look how far you've come. You must feel very proud of yourself, because I noticed in the days leading up to this, you were teasing this campaign to your followers on social media, and you posted a very personal and emotional post about the benefits that exercise gave to you when you were of primary school age, the mental health benefits. Your home life was chaotic and unstable at times. Talk to me about what exercise and movement did for you, for that young boy we're looking at on the screen now.
Yeah, there's me with the blonde hair. I mean, look, I suppose people see that my life's very different to what it is now. But when I was a kid, we grew up in this environment which is quite chaotic and unstable, because my dad was a drug addict, a heroin addict. My mum had severe anxiety, eating disorders, and also combined with OCD around the housework and cleaning. So you can imagine for a young boy living in that environment, especially now as a dad, I can't imagine myself being that boy in that environment. But luckily, I found sport and exercise, and I realised from 4 years old, I honestly remember the moment that I did some exercise, did some running or something, and I remember thinking, I can handle and deal with my emotions now. I can release that fear and anxiety and the stress of like going home to this house through movement. So because that's in my DNA, that is really the message I'm trying to promote.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days looking warm and humid with an increasing risk of thunderstorms, but the weekend's going to be cooler and more widely unsettled. Britain will see evening showers, especially central parts where hail and thunder are possible, but elsewhere it's looking mainly fine. It's going to be unusually windy for much of England and Wales. The showers are going to fade away overnight, lingering over northern England longest. The wind will ease up to shorthand for wind easing up. Later, the far southwest will see low cloud and patchy rain moving in.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Well, a big thanks to Joe Wicks. We're back tomorrow night at 8. Up next, it's Yelda Hakeem with The World. See you then.